They called her the token female. They thought she was only in special forces training to fill some quota, but when the hostage situation broke out and everyone said no one could handle it, she quietly stood up. Because they didn't know that she wasn't just a woman, she was SEAL Team 6's most lethal operator. This story shows how one woman silently shattered the prejudices in her military career and shocked everyone when her true identity was revealed. What happened in the end would become an unforgettable lesson for the entire Special Forces unit. Little Creek Naval Amphibious Base on the Virginia coast was waking up to the rumble of military vehicles in the early morning hours. Candidates arriving to join the Special Forces selection and training program were getting out of trucks. Most were men, muscle-bound, confident looks, and that "I own this place" attitude. Among them, one woman walked quietly. Maya Rodriguez, 29 years old, medium height, athletic build, but someone who never showed off. She wore the same camouflage uniform as the others, same bag, same embroidered name tag. But there was something different about her presence, a silence, a calmness. "Here she comes," whispered a large candidate to his buddy. "There's always one in every program. The diversity picks." Maya heard this but showed no reaction. She just slung her bag over her shoulder and walked toward the registration table. The registration officer looked at her name, paused briefly, then continued. Nothing was said. The hierarchy had already formed among the camp buildings. The loudest ones were at the front. Those trying to get attention were in the middle, and the quiet ones were labeled as ghosts. Maya didn't fit perfectly into any category, but somehow she was placed at the bottom of them all. By the second day, the whispers had started. During chow time in the mess hall, one of the loudest candidates, Mike Stevens with his Massachusetts accent, was talking. "There she is, this cycle's diversity example. They take one every time to pad the stats." Another candidate laughed. "They never last a week anyway. Same story every time." Maya didn't react to this either. When she was deliberately excluded from team exercises, when others groaned every time she was assigned to their flight sim rotations, even when someone drew a pink heart on her training helmet, she remained silent. The instructors didn't intervene. Nothing Maya did warranted attention. She met all standards, followed regulations, answered when called. Her fitness scores were above average, her test results were flawless, but there was no fire, no aggression, no spark, at least none that they could see. They didn't know that Maya had lived entire lives before. Her ID said 29, but her hands told a much older story. Steady, scarred hands that had learned to move by instinct, not hesitation. She had applied 6 months earlier under a special transfer clause. It had raised some eyebrows but wasn't illegal. A single phone call had been made from a name that couldn't be entered into the system, a quiet reference. After that, no one asked too many questions. Maya's room was the smallest in the barracks. Single bunk, metal locker, one window facing the maintenance depot. At night, while listening to the distant rumble of turbines, while others played with their phones or took group selfies, she would pull out a folded map she kept hidden behind her locker. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. Some fold marks had sweat stains. One corner was completely burned by something hotter than the sun. By the third week, Maya's silence had become a target. "Hey Rodriguez," a candidate yelled on the running track. "You gonna actually speak today or just photosynthesize?" Laughter rippled through the group. Maya didn't flinch, adjusted her gloves, and continued looking at the checklist in her hand. "She probably thinks she's better than us," another muttered. "Nah, she just thinks we're all amateurs. Probably flew puddle jumpers for her uncle," said another. But the instructors were watching, especially Major Henderson, who was in charge of field simulation briefings. A veteran who had flown in and out of combat zones, most of them couldn't pronounce. During early evaluations, he usually stood in the corners of the room, hands behind his back, observing. He had paused twice over Maya's simulation reports, looking at her post-mission logs, scrolling back to watch how she'd handled the engine failure scenario. Her reflexes weren't just fast, they were preloaded, executed with the kind of muscle memory that couldn't be taught in 3 weeks or 3 years. "Where'd you say you trained again?" he asked one afternoon as Maya left the simulator bay. "Civil aviation program," she replied flatly. Henderson's jaw worked slightly. He said nothing more. What he didn't say hung louder than what he had. It wasn't until the 5th week that anyone truly paid attention. The candidates were assigned a simulated night operation. 3-person teams, blackout conditions, emergency navigation only. It was meant to simulate total system failure under stress, including surprise reroutes and terrain adjustments. Most teams floundered. A few kept their composure. But Maya's team, assigned with 2 of the loudest skeptics, came back with a perfect navigation score. When pressed in debrief, her partners couldn't explain how she had made the right call in a blind turn using only altimeter and terrain drift timing. Afterward, one of them asked if she had memorized the terrain map. She hadn't answered, but her gaze had narrowed. That night, one of the instructors passed by her dorm and found her cleaning her boots with quiet precision. No music, no lights, just a desk lamp and the slow rhythm of her hands. "You flew before, didn't you?" he asked casually, pausing in the doorway. Maya didn't look up. "Everyone here has flown." "No," he said, "not like that." Maya didn't respond. The silence said enough. By the 7th week, the major called for a closed-door briefing. All candidates, no phones, no recordings. It was a review of past operations, the kind of cautionary case study used to underscore the risks of overconfidence in unfamiliar territory. Operation name redacted, date classified, location somewhere near the border. Henderson played a fragment of cockpit footage, thermal overlays, black silhouettes moving through desert canyons, gunfire flaring in white bursts. A voice came over the comms, distorted but firm. "This is Raven 9. I'm in the corridor. LZ's hot. I repeat hot. Requesting exfil now." Most candidates glanced at the screen without recognition. Only one froze. Her shoulders didn't move, but her right hand slowly clenched. She recognized that voice. Not just the call sign. She'd been there. Raven 9 was her bird. The debrief room emptied slowly. Some candidates left murmuring, others silent, unsure if the footage they'd just seen had been real or part of a psychological test. The major had offered no context beyond the clip. No names, no outcome, just that cold dispatch call in the dark. "Raven 9, LZ's hot." Then the screen had gone black and the lights came back on, and no one had said a word. Maya hadn't moved at all. She'd remained seated until the room was nearly empty, her hands still on the table, the knuckles whitening from pressure she wasn't showing anywhere else. The major didn't look at her, didn't call on her, but as he left the room he gave a sharp glance to the tech sergeant at the back, a subtle nod, eyes locked. Message received. 3 days later, the assignments changed quietly. Maya's name appeared in bold on the advanced rotary wing list, a track no one had seen her request. Stevens, ever the loud one, barked out, "Wait, Rodriguez? Seriously? Who the hell signs off for night ops?" A few candidates nodded in agreement, but the instructors didn't answer. It was clear someone far above their pay grade had authorized it, and nobody wanted to be the one to question that kind of authority. Maya showed up to the first rotation briefing already in gear. No protest, no reaction to the noise around her. She studied the terrain schematic like she already knew the route, and maybe she did. The flight sim was different now. Gone were the basic engine failures and stall recoveries. Now it was full-scale evasion, blacked-out landscapes, hostile airspace with variable intel overlays. Maya never flinched. She moved through the threat zones with uncanny precision, predicted routes before the AI flagged them, and executed low-altitude maneuvers, so tight the instructor at the console leaned forward involuntarily, as if trying to catch a mistake. She didn't make one. It was on week 10 that her past began leaking through the cracks, not by her words but by omission. Instructors stopped referring to her as candidate. They started using operator. When a civilian contractor came in for a guest lecture, retired SEAL, quiet man with burn scars up his arms, he spotted her in the back row and paused mid-sentence. His brow furrowed. Then he continued the lecture without addressing her, but his tone changed. Less theoretical, more real. Everyone noticed. After class, he waited by the door as the candidates filed out. He caught her with a glance. "Didn't expect to see you in a classroom again," he said quietly. She didn't answer, just nodded. "They still call you Viper?" "No," she said. "They don't call me anything." The man gave a quiet, almost respectful laugh. "Well, that's going to change." It did. The colonel called her in the next morning. No salute, no introduction. He pointed to a closed file on his desk, thick, red-banded with a lock code not common to training facilities. "You're not here to train," he said. "You're here to observe, or rather to remember who you were." She remained standing. "That voice in the clip," he said, "it was you." Maya didn't deny it. "And you operated under SEAL Team 6. That part I figured out weeks ago." Still no reply. So he continued, "Why the charade? Why come back through candidate ranks? You could have taught half the syllabus blindfolded." She looked at him then, for the first time fully, "Because I forgot why I started operating." That silenced the colonel more than anything else. He nodded slowly. "There's an advanced live rotation next week," he said. "Real gear, real nighttime insertion training. Yes, but with Black Hawks, full comms, risk parameters. I want you in the bird, observer status, full control." Maya hesitated. "You'll catch heat for that." He leaned back, fingers steepled. "I already have. But the Navy's not in the business of wasting operators who've completed 6 impossible extractions in one night." She stared at the wall behind him for a moment. One of the framed mission photographs, black silhouettes against a burning skyline, then nodded once. 2 weeks later, the alarm that would change everything rang out across the base. Not a drill, a real-world situation had developed. A terrorist cell had taken hostages at the American embassy compound in a hostile nation. 12 diplomats, including the ambassador's daughter. The intel was fragmentary, but the threat was real. Executions would begin in 6 hours. Every elite unit had been consulted.
Delta Force said the timeline was impossible. Army Rangers called it a suicide mission. Navy SEALs from other teams estimated a 15% success probability with their best operators. The briefing room was tense. Satellite images showed the compound, 3 buildings, multiple guard posts, civilian shields. Any conventional assault would result in massive casualties. We need someone who can get in solo, the mission commander said. Silent infiltration, precise extraction. But the risk assessment, he didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew what he meant. It was a one-way ticket. That's when Maya stood up. The room fell silent. Every head turned toward her. Stevens, who had tormented her for months, actually dropped his jaw. "I'll do it," she said quietly. "Candidate Rodriguez," the commander began. "This isn't a training exercise. I know exactly what it is," Maya interrupted, her voice steady and cold. "And I've done it before, 23 times." The silence in the room was deafening. 6 hours later, a stealth helicopter approached the embassy compound, under cover of darkness. Maya sat in the cabin, no longer wearing candidate stripes. The mission patch on her shoulder read, Dev GRU, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, SEAL Team 6. Her gear was different now. Night vision that cost more than most people's cars, weapons that didn't officially exist, and the quiet confidence of someone who had walked this path before. The insertion was flawless. She hit the ground running, moving through shadows like smoke. Guards fell silently, one by one. Security systems went dark. Locks opened as if by magic. She found the hostages in the basement of the main building, 12 terrified faces looking up at her. "I'm here to get you home," she said simply. The extraction took 47 minutes. Every hostage made it to the pickup zone alive. 0 friendly casualties. The terrorist cell was neutralized with surgical precision. When Maya walked back into the briefing room at Little Creek 12 hours later, she found the entire candidate class standing at attention. Stevens stepped forward, his face pale. "Ma'am," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We didn't know." Maya looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, a small, genuine expression that transformed her entire face. "That was the point," she said. The next morning, Maya found something that hadn't been there before. On the bulletin board outside the mess hall, someone had posted a new notice. It was a commendation letter, signed by the Secretary of the Navy. But more importantly, it was signed by every single candidate in her class, including Stevens. The letter read, "We came here thinking we knew what strength looked like. We were wrong. True strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It just acts when action is needed, speaks when speech is required, and leads when leadership is called for." At the bottom, in handwriting she recognized as Stevens, "We thought you were here to fill a quota. Turns out, you were here to fill a void we didn't even know existed." Maya read it twice, then carefully took it down and walked to her quarters. She placed it in her locker, next to the burned map from Afghanistan. That afternoon, the colonel called her to his office one final time. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair, "ready to teach these kids what real special operations looks like?" Maya smiled. "Yes, sir, but I do it my way. Wouldn't have it any other," he replied. 3 months later, Maya Rodriguez stood in front of a new class of candidates. On her uniform were the insignia she had earned through blood, sweat, and more missions than most operators saw in a lifetime. But more importantly, she wore the respect of every person in that room. "My name is Senior Chief Rodriguez," she began. "Some of you may have heard stories about what qualifies someone to be here. Let me tell you the only story that matters, the one you're about to write with your own actions." She paused, looking at each face in turn. "I don't care what brought you here. I don't care what anyone thinks about why you're here. All I care about is what you do when everything goes to hell and you're the only one who can fix it." A young female candidate in the back row raised her hand. "Ma'am, what if people don't think we belong?" Maya smiled, and in that smile was every silent moment she had endured, every whispered comment she had ignored, every time she had proven herself without saying a word. "Then you prove them wrong," she said simply. "Not with words, with actions. Not once, but every single day until the day comes when they realize they need you more than you need their approval." The room was silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not the silence of doubt or dismissal, but the silence of respect. That night, as Maya walked across the base, she passed the memorial wall where photos of fallen operators lined the corridor. Among them were faces she had known, friends she had lost, heroes who had paid the ultimate price. She stopped in front of one photograph, a young woman, not much older than the candidates she now trained. Below the photo, a simple inscription: "She proved that courage has no gender." Maya touched the frame gently, then continued walking. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students, new opportunities to prove that excellence recognizes no quotas, only results. As she reached her quarters, she could hear the sound of candidates studying in the distance. Their voices were different now, respectful, determined, inspired. She had come to this place to remember why she became an operator. She had stayed to ensure others would never forget. And in the morning, she would do it all again.